She thought she was untouchable, until the restaurant's owner stepped in with a lesson money couldn't buy. In the glimmering lights of Donovan's, a high-end restaurant in San Diego, Evelyn Monroe was a woman who commanded the room. With a diamond necklace that sparkled in sync with her every movement and a demeanor that seemed to tower over everyone around her, she had the kind of presence that said she was in control. Her friends, all just as polished, sat around her, their laughter louder than the soft hum of the restaurant. To them, the world revolved around their luxury. The waitstaff, like Emily, could hardly be considered part of their world. Emily, a young woman working long shifts, her eyes barely staying open as she balanced another tray of drinks, had become used to the condescending looks. The kind of looks that didn't notice her as she worked tirelessly, just another cog in the machine. She was invisible to them, an employee who was only acknowledged when she made a mistake. And as much as she tried not to feel the sting of the comments that slid past her ears, some days felt harder than others. Tonight she was carrying food to Evelyn's table when the evening took a sharp turn. As she placed the entree down, Evelyn, with a raised brow, inspected her dish and immediately turned the spotlight on Emily. "Is this supposed to be medium rare?" she questioned, her voice cutting through the atmosphere. "It looks closer to well done. How long have we been waiting?" Emily froze, the pressure mounting. But it wasn't just the complaint, it was the venom behind it. The small laugh that came from Evelyn's friends felt like daggers. Evelyn continued, her voice loud enough for those around to hear, punctuating every word with disdain. "Honestly, it's not that hard to get an order right," she muttered. Her friends laughed along, enjoying the discomfort they knew they were causing. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding, trying to keep her composure despite the cruelty. But Evelyn wasn't done yet. She continued her verbal assault, unaware of the quiet shift happening elsewhere in the room. The tension in the air thickened, but little did Evelyn know, someone had been watching the entire scene unfold. The atmosphere was charged, and for the first time, Emily felt the weight of her own silence, knowing that her patience wouldn't remain unchallenged for long. As Emily retreated to the kitchen to fix the meal, the weight of the encounter lingered in her chest. She'd dealt with rude customers before, but something about Evelyn's words, the coldness in her voice, felt different. It was as if Evelyn's condescension wasn't just a reflection of a mistake, but a deep, unspoken belief in her own superiority. The other staff continued their duties, oblivious to the discomfort in Emily's heart. But one person noticed, the man in the grey suit. He had been quietly observing, his gaze focused and unwavering throughout the ordeal. Charles Donovan, the restaurant's owner, was a man of few words, but his eyes missed nothing. He had spent years building Donovan's into the upscale establishment it had become, a place where luxury met excellence. But even as the glimmer of success surrounded him, he had always believed that respect, humility, and dignity were the true foundations of his restaurant. Watching the way Evelyn spoke to Emily, his discomfort grew. This was not how he ran his business. His employees were not to be belittled for any reason. The mistake in the meal was a trivial matter, easily fixed. But the way Evelyn had treated Emily, so carelessly, so cruelly, was something he could not ignore. Charles had always kept a low profile in the restaurant. He preferred to remain behind the scenes, observing and listening, trusting his management team to run the day-to-day operations. But tonight, something inside him shifted. He wasn't just the owner of the restaurant. He was responsible for the environment his team worked in, and he couldn't stand by and watch one of his employees be dehumanized in such a way. After a quiet exchange with the restaurant manager, Charles stood from his table. His movements were deliberate, measured, as he made his way toward Evelyn's table. The room seemed to hold its breath as the man in the grey suit approached. He wasn't walking in with the authority of a boss trying to reprimand an employee. No, he was about to teach a lesson, not with anger, but with quiet strength, and the kind of integrity money could never buy. The room grew silent, every diner now anticipating what would happen next, knowing this would be more than just a confrontation, it would be a moment that could change everything. As Charles approached Evelyn's table, a wave of tension rippled through the restaurant. The usual hum of conversations faded into a hushed silence, and all eyes subtly shifted toward the unfolding scene. Elia, still perched confidently at her table, hadn't noticed him approaching. She was too caught up in her self-assurance, in the belief that her wealth and status gave her the right to treat others with disdain. The faintest smirk still lingered on her lips, her mind occupied with the thought of what she would say next, how she would relish in the discomfort she'd caused. But when Charles reached the table, he didn't speak at first. His calm presence seemed to quiet the room even further. Evelyn's eyes finally flickered up at him, and the smug expression on her face faltered as she recognized who he was. She quickly straightened, adjusting her posture, but the sense of superiority still clung to her. She half smiled, ready to deflect or brush off whatever comment might come her way. But Charles wasn't here for small talk or excuses. He didn't need to raise his voice. His calm, unwavering gaze held the power of authority. "I'm Charles Donovan, the owner of this restaurant," he said simply, his voice steady but firm. Evelyn blinked, her brow furrowing slightly, unsure of what to expect. "I've been listening to the way you've spoken to Emily," Charles continued, his tone unchanged. "And, while I understand that mistakes happen in any kitchen, the way you treated her was not only disrespectful, it was unacceptable." The words hung in the air, but Charles didn't let them settle. "Money might buy you luxury, but it doesn't give you the right to belittle the people who make that luxury possible," he said, his gaze sharp and unwavering. "Emily here is one of the hardest working people I know, and she represents the values I hold dear: respect, professionalism, and kindness. You, on the other hand, have clearly forgotten that respect is something you earn, not demand." Evelyn's face reddened slightly, the weight of his words sinking in. Her mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came out. Her usual defense mechanisms were failing her, and she could feel her carefully constructed persona beginning to crack under the pressure. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, but even they couldn't dismiss the truth in Charles's words. The silence stretched, and the once dominant figure at the table now found herself shrinking under the gaze of someone who understood that true power didn't come from wealth, it came from integrity. The restaurant was now heavy with the stillness of Charles's words. A quiet shift had taken place, and it was clear to everyone in the room that this wasn't about to be a typical confrontation. Evelyn, once the center of attention, now sat in the periphery of the room's collective gaze. Her friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure how to salvage the situation, but it was too late for that. The damage had already been done. Evelyn had no way of hiding behind her wealth, her sharp remarks, or her poised facade. Charles, without hesitation, turned to Emily, who was still standing by, her face flushed with a mix of confusion and silent gratitude. "You handled yourself with grace, Emily," Charles said, his voice low yet full of admiration. "You've shown the kind of professionalism that many would struggle to display under such pressure. And for that I'm proud to have you here." His words weren't just an acknowledgement, they were a recognition of Emily's worth. She wasn't invisible to Charles, nor from that moment forward would she ever be again. Evelyn, still reeling, finally managed to lift her eyes to Charles, but there was no trace of the cocky defiance that had once been her shield. Her earlier confidence had slipped away, replaced by a realization that shook her to her core. Power, in its most honest form, wasn't something that could be bought or displayed. It was earned through integrity, humility, and a genuine regard for others. For a moment, the room held its collective breath, waiting for Evelyn to respond. But she didn't. She couldn't. Words were useless now. The tables had turned, and there was no room for excuses in a place where respect was the true currency. Charles didn't speak further. His silence, filled with meaning, conveyed everything. His next move was swift and deliberate. He gestured to the champagne bottle that had been placed earlier and said, "This bottle, along with your entire check, will be donated to an organization supporting young women who are striving for a better future." The finality in his tone left no room for debate. The money Evelyn had spent on the meal, on herself, would be redirected toward a cause far greater than any lavish dinner could ever be. The room absorbed the weight of his decision. Some patrons exchanged glances, nodding in silent agreement. Others couldn't hide their satisfaction as Evelyn, the once commanding figure, was left to sit in the quiet aftermath, a stark reminder that the power to humiliate was fleeting, but the power to uplift was lasting. The evening had shifted, and with it Evelyn's perception of herself. She had been so certain of her place in the world, of the respect she was owed, the hierarchy she operated within, but now, faced with the consequences of her actions, the illusion was gone. Her earlier smugness, her confidence in belittling those she deemed beneath her, evaporated as if it had never existed. The truth was clear: respect could not be bought, and no amount of wealth or status could protect her from the consequences of cruelty. As Evelyn sat, silently simmering, her friends shifted awkwardly in their seats. None of them knew how to ease the tension. They had all witnessed something that would stay with them, a stark lesson in humility and accountability. The room, once filled with laughter and light conversation, now hummed with the energy of quiet reflection. Everyone had seen what had unfolded, and they couldn't unsee it. In the same way that Evelyn had once felt untouchable, so too had she now become the object of a lesson that would linger in the minds of everyone present. Meanwhile, Emily, still reeling from the public confrontation, felt a surge of mixed emotions: relief, embarrassment, pride. She had never expected the situation to unfold this way. What had started as a simple meal at the restaurant, filled with condescension and mockery, had turned into a moment that would change her life. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, valued, her hard work acknowledged, not by empty praise, but by real action. She wasn't just the waitress in the eyes of Charles Donovan, but a person of substance, someone who had earned respect through grace under pressure. As the evening wore on, the impact of Charles's intervention continued to ripple through the restaurant. The staff, who had once quietly witnessed the humiliation of their colleagues, now looked at Emily differently. Some offered quiet smiles, others words of encouragement. It was as if, in that single moment, a new dynamic had taken root. The restaurant was no longer just a place for fine dining. It was a place where kindness and respect were just as integral to the experience as the food and drink. And as for Evelyn, she knew she would never forget this night. The lesson Charles had delivered was one that money couldn't shield her from, a truth that would linger far longer than any champagne toast or fine meal ever could. She had been humbled, but in that humbling she was forced to reckon with her own character, something far more valuable than the privileges she had once taken for granted. The next day, the air in the restaurant felt different. There was a quiet shift, something that lingered beneath the usual hum of orders being placed and glasses clinking. The staff, though carrying on with their duties, seemed more attentive, more connected to one another. Emily's newfound confidence wasn't just a reflection of her dignity being acknowledged. It was a spark that had lit a small but powerful change in the way the entire team viewed their roles. The humiliation that had once been a daily part of the job, those underhanded remarks, the dismissive looks, seemed less tolerable now. Charles Donovan's actions had sparked a quiet revolution. Emily walked into the restaurant the following morning with a slight sense of unease, but it quickly dissolved as she entered the kitchen. The once daunting task of walking past the same faces, those who had once given her looks of sympathy, or worse, indifference, now felt different. She felt grounded, as though the very air had changed around her. Her colleagues, who had always been kind, now looked at her with an unspoken respect. And it wasn't just Emily. The ripple of Charles's message had struck a chord with everyone in that room, and the staff began to speak more openly with each other, sharing their stories of unfair treatment, their frustrations, and their dreams. Across the room, the manager no longer seemed distant. His smile, once neutral, now carried a warmth that made Emily feel like part of something greater. "You did well yesterday," he said quietly as she passed by him. "It's not easy to stand your ground. You've got more strength than most people realize." His words weren't just a compliment. They were a reflection of the subtle but profound shift taking place within the restaurant's walls. It was clear to Emily now that the smallest act of kindness, the decision to stand up when no one else would, had a ripple effect that was capable of transforming more than just one person. In the dining area, the patrons also noticed the difference. As they sat down to enjoy their meals, there was a palpable sense of gratitude in the air. It wasn't just about the delicious food or the impeccable service. It was about the atmosphere that had been cultivated in the wake of Charles's quiet but powerful intervention. People were more present, more aware of the human interactions happening around them, and that was something no amount of luxury could replace. For Evelyn, the change wasn't as immediate. She still walked through the halls of the restaurant with her head held high, but there was a distinct lack of the arrogance that had once accompanied her every move. She had learned that her wealth and status couldn't shield her from accountability, and it was a lesson that was slowly seeping into her day-to-day life. The discomfort she had felt at the restaurant lingered long after she had left that evening. It wasn't just about being called out in front of her friends. It was about the realization that she had been blind to the lives of those around her, the people she had once dismissed as beneath her. In the following days, a subtle but powerful change continued to unfold at Donovan's. Emily's growing confidence wasn't just something she wore like a new outfit, it was embedded in her actions. She moved through the dining area with a quiet strength, each step a testament to her resilience. The once weary, nervous energy that clung to her shoulders had melted away, replaced by a calm assurance. The rest of the staff began to mirror this shift, no longer just employees fulfilling their duties, but individuals who knew their worth and how vital they were to the restaurant's operation. As the weeks went by, the atmosphere in the restaurant grew warmer, more inclusive. The waitstaff, the kitchen crew, even the dishwashers found themselves treated with a respect that had long been denied them. Charles Donovan's actions had ignited a fire of integrity within the establishment. The staff, once divided by unspoken lines of hierarchy and resentment, now gathered together during breaks to share stories and ideas, to bond over shared experiences. They talked about their dreams. Some of them had always wanted to attend culinary school, others dreamed of running their own restaurants. But now, these dreams didn't feel so out of reach. It wasn't just the employees who noticed, the customers too felt a difference. The food, though always exquisite, now came with a sense of purpose behind it. The service was quicker, but there was a new kind of attention to detail. People no longer dined at Donovan's simply for the prestige of it. They came for the experience, for the warmth that radiated from the kitchen and the smiling faces of the staff who worked tirelessly to make sure every guest felt valued. For Evelyn, the change was much harder to accept. She continued to dine at Donovan's, though her visits were now quieter, more introspective. Every time she walked through those doors, she couldn't help but reflect on the lesson Charles had taught her. No longer could she look down on those who worked for her. She started to recognize the humanity in them, seeing their struggles, their dreams, and their worth. She had been humbled, not by anyone's words, but by the truth of her own behavior. She realized that her wealth, her status, none of it mattered if she couldn't treat others with kindness and dignity. And so, as the restaurant flourished, so did the people within it. What started as a quiet, unspoken shift grew into something that transcended the walls of the establishment. A reminder to all that true power wasn't about money, status, or reputation. It was about respect, humility, and the willingness to stand up for what was right, no matter who was watching. In the months following the transformation at Donovan's, Emily's newfound confidence continued to shape her future. She had become a beacon of change, not just for the staff, but for the restaurant's patrons. Customers who had once regarded her as just another face in the background began to look at her differently. They saw a young woman who, despite her humble beginnings, held her ground with grace and poise. It wasn't just the quality of the service they appreciated anymore, it was the quiet dignity that she exuded. The ripple effect of Charles Donovan's actions wasn't confined to the walls of the restaurant. Emily's story spread through the local community, and word of the kindness revolution at Donovan's became a point of conversation. People who had dined there before returned, not only for the food but for the feeling of inclusion and respect that now seemed to permeate every corner of the restaurant. The energy was palpable, and with it came new opportunities for Emily. One afternoon, as Emily was clearing tables, the manager approached her with a surprising offer. He had been speaking with Charles, and they both agreed that Emily's work ethic and resilience deserved to be recognized. They offered her the chance to manage a new restaurant location they were opening, a step up from her current position, a promotion that many would only dream of. At first, Emily hesitated. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and the thought of leaving the team that had supported her felt like a step away from the community she had helped build. But Charles, sensing her uncertainty, reassured her. "Emily, the reason we're offering you this opportunity is not because you're just good at your job. It's because you understand something that too many people forget. Leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge." With those words, Emily made her decision. She accepted the offer, knowing that her journey was far from over. The leadership she had learned through her trials would now be put to the test in an entirely new way. And as she stepped into her new role, she carried with her the lessons of kindness, integrity, and respect that had shaped her both personally and professionally. Emily's story didn't end with her promotion. It was a continuing evolution, a reminder to herself, to the restaurant, and to everyone who crossed her path, that true strength lies in the ability to uplift others, to embrace change, and to lead with a heart full of empathy. The story of Emily's transformation at Donovan's highlights the profound impact of kindness, integrity, and resilience in overcoming adversity. In our current world, it's easy to overlook the importance of respect for others, especially those in positions we deem lower, such as service staff. Yet, Emily's journey shows that every person, regardless of their job or status, deserves to be treated with dignity and kindness. In today's fast-paced and often competitive environment, it's crucial to remember that how we treat others says more about us than it does about them. A single moment of respect can change the course of someone's day, even their life. If we choose to lead with empathy, we can create environments where people thrive, whether in our personal lives or professional settings. Furthermore, Emily's ability to rise above the mistreatment she faced is a reminder that challenges can be opportunities for growth. Instead of being crushed by negativity, we can use such experiences to fuel our resilience and empower us to make positive changes, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. So, the next time we find ourselves in a position of influence or power, let's reflect on Emily's story. Let's approach others with kindness and respect, remembering that the real measure of success is how we uplift those who cross our path.